We now have a brief presentation by Mr. Tom Darden of the investment fund Cherokee. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. What an honor it is to be here today to address those of you who have done so much to change the way we've addressed our energy needs and our environmental needs, and to change science. As Erica mentioned, I'm the founder of Cherokee, and I've been asked to tell you who we are and why we created industrial heat as a funding source for L&R inventors. Unlike many of you, I'm not a scientist, I'm an entrepreneur. But we share the common bond of innovation. As Peter Drucker wrote, entrepreneurship sees the major task in society as doing something different, rather than doing something better what is already being done. Doing better what is already being done is like making coal power plants a little bit more efficient. You are working to make them unnecessary. Thank God that some, like many of you, have the courage to disrupt. In 1921, experts determined that the limits of flight had been reached already. In 1932, it was determined that nuclear fission was unlikely ever to be feasible. And in the 1950s, when I was born, it was widely believed that pollution was a necessary part of economic development. Paradigm shifts do not come easily, especially in science. As Thomas Kuhn wrote in The Nature of Scientific Revolutions, usually they are born out of the crises of our time. If you're on the leading edge of a paradigm shift, you will be attacked by your peers and you will be attacked by the institutions of the status quo. We feel called to upset two core business paradigms. First, the traditional ethos of environmentalism is that we should strive to be less bad. But as America's leading environmental philosopher William McDonough points out in his book, Cradle to Cradle, being less bad is not being good. It's still bad, just a little bit less so. If you're driving your car toward a cliff, it doesn't help you to slow down. You need to turn around and go in a different direction. We need solutions that don't create pollution in the first place, not marginal improvements that only reduce pollution. Second, let's challenge the assumption of scarcity. We actually live in a world of abundance, at least with respect to energy. Sadly, due to society's ineffectiveness to date, the world struggles with energy scarcity, at least in some regions. Why do we burn petroleum or coal, which unlocks only a tiny fraction of the true energy inside? When we do this, we release almost all of the mass of the coal into the air through stack emissions. And then we scatter this mass around the planet. Carbon and heavy metals can be highly beneficial. They're not necessarily pollutants, but they are if they're in the wrong place. CO2 in the air is a pollutant. Carbon in a tree is not. Heavy metals can be highly beneficial unless they're in the wrong place, like on farmland in China or in our oceans. We need an entirely new paradigm, and this hopeful vision was the genesis of our work at Industrial Heat. When I entered school, the United States was in the midst of an environmental crisis. Most people have forgotten about this or perhaps never even knew about it. But when I was young, periodically, industrial rivers in our cities would burst into flame due to the pollution in them. And sometimes in some of our worst polluted cities, people drove with their headlights on during the day. Our air pollution was as bad as air pollution in China in some cities. This was America when I was beginning to think about my place in the world. I was worried when I saw that photo, the first photo of our living planet from space. Many of you remember that. We had never seen the Earth, which is ironic because we live on it. We could see that it was a living planet. I felt compelled to do something about this. Later at university, I wrote my master's thesis on acid rain air pollution from coal plants. My first job was at the Korea Institute of Science and Technology in Seoul, where I worked on pollution from burning coal, which was used for home heating and for cooking. I saw pollution throughout East Asia. I returned and went to Yale to become an environmental lawyer. But in the U.S., practicing law is some people think it's somewhat boring, and I fell in that category. Thankfully, I got a job working at Bain & Company in steel plants on energy efficiency. In 1984, I converted brick plants from burning fossil fuels to burning biomass, which was being dumped into landfills where it turned into methane gas. We became mostly carbon neutral, except for our electricity use, and I obsessed on finding ways that we can make carbon-free electricity. I was never successful. In 1985, I discovered soil pollution at one of our brick plant sites from decades of petroleum use. I found some professors at Virginia Polytechnic University, which is not far away, professors who dealt with soil bacteria, so we began to grow bacteria which would consume pollution in the ground. I funded their business, Biosystems Technology, and then we created Cherokee Environmental to clean up contaminated soil all over the East Coast. And over the years, we cleaned up 15 million tons of dirt. That would be enough that if you stacked it all up on a golf course, it would raise the level of that golf course by about 400 feet or 130 meters. We began to buy contaminated property to clean up. We raised over $2 billion for this, for buying and remediating pollution on land. And we've owned 550 properties in the U.S., Canada, and Europe, including a refinery site not too far from here in Trieste. Some people think Cherokee is a real estate company because it owned a lot of property, has owned a lot of property, but our property work is driven by our pollution focus. I saw that we could affect pollution by working with smart scientists at Virginia Tech. We don't internally have the capacity for scientific innovation. We're business people, we're not scientists, but we realized that we could find scientists who had ideas. And so we branched out. We kept doing this with other professors and other universities. Between 1985 and the present, we've started or invested in over 100 venture, technology, or startup companies. Many of these address water or air pollution or energy grid management. Almost none of these were our own ideas. These were others' ideas. My primary goal is to reduce pollution, so for years we've been going abroad to transfer technology because that's where most of the pollution is. I go to China regularly to advise officials and business leaders on methods and processes for addressing pollution. They've declared 19% of their land too contaminated for agricultural use. And this is mostly due to air pollution dropping contaminants on the land. Obviously, this is a huge social issue. I began to do this in the former Soviet Union in the 1990s, and we have also explored similar paths in the Middle East, in India, and in Indonesia, focusing on areas with most population. In order to address the world's environmental problems, solutions must be ubiquitous. They cannot exist only in Europe and the United States. In the early part of this decade, Cherokee had entered a relatively stable part of its history. The next generation of leaders was being prepared to carry our values and processes forward, and our existing projects were operating smoothly. My children were in their 20s and 30s, and I was spending time with them and with my wife for the first time really in 35 years. I had rebuilt my experimental airplane, and I was installing a parachute in it, looking forward to using it more. The airplane. But one day, I received a random call about cold fusion. I didn't give it much credence because I remembered in detail the disclosure by Fleischmann and Pons from years before, and I believed the subject was dead. Then 30 days later, I received another unrelated inquiry from a different group. So we began to do some research, and then 30 days later, I received a call from another group. We invested in 100 startup or technology companies. I had never gotten an inquiry about fusion, about LNR. 3 within 30-day increments. We funded 2 of these groups, and then later, as many of you know, we licensed Andrea Rossi's technology. Since then, we made grants to university groups exploring technologies in this space, and we continue to fund additional teams. We envision an ecosystem of collaboration where great scientists can work together to develop the many systems and technologies society will need to shift away from polluting fossil fuels. Our goal is to bring non-polluting energy to those who need it most, especially in the developing world. We also don't believe that there's one solution. We believe that there are many solutions to these problems. To implement this vision, we determined that a business-based approach would be the most effective strategy. We looked at many others. I know that some of you have felt that businesses are or have been adversarial to your work. I understand that. But recall that commerce has long proven to be the primary engine of change in every technical endeavor. We engage with the large companies, and we all need them to achieve ubiquity for your ideas. We want to work in a collaborative way with many large companies, and we want to help others do that. We started industrial heat because we believed LNR technology was worth pursuing even if we were unsuccessful ultimately. We were willing to be wrong. We were willing to invest time and resources to see if this might be an area of useful research in our quest to eliminate pollution. At the time, we were not especially optimistic, but the global benefits were compelling. We've had some success, and we're expanding our work. We're collaborating with and investing alongside fellow researchers and developers. Scientists compete to be the first, but then count on open sharing of what has been discovered to advance the process. They want to be able to safely share their work in an environment where why they do what they do truly matters and where it aligns with what they value. They want to know that their work will be funded and that their ideas will be merit tested and advanced as merited and that they will be rewarded fairly. We're privileged to be creating that kind of environment at Industrial Heat, and we believe that we may be, at last, on the verge of a new paradigm shift, one that would create a new opportunity for innovation and entrepreneurship to advance the cause of abundance in the face of scarcity and the continuing calls to simply be less bad. When I look around this room, I'm filled with 2 strong sentiments, one warm and positive, and the other is cold and sad. You've given your lives to your research, notwithstanding great challenges, and you've made a great difference to the world. Thank you for your years of hard work and progress. Every day I think of you, and I am inspired. At the same time, I would like to say how truly sorry I am that society has attacked you for the last 3 decades. The treatment of Fleischmann and Pons and the treatment of many of you by mainstream institutions and the media will go down in history as one more example of scientific infanticide, where entrenched interests kill off their divergent progeny. This seems to be a dark component of human nature. I note the irony that we are in Padova, Galileo's city. But notwithstanding this long suffering, you've remained faithful to your work. Thank you for your intense focus and contributions. In the face of challenges, we must carry on with good faith, goodwill, good intentions, and honesty driven by the better angels of our nature, not impaired or constrained by the behavior of others. We also need not be constrained by our own minds. Ironically, the expert who claimed that flight had achieved its limits in 1921 was Orville Wright, the inventor of the airplane. And the expert who declared that fission was not likely, that, of course, was Einstein. We must be ever vigilant to keep our own minds open always. Your time has come. The frenzy of fear gripping China and India regarding air pollution and also water and land pollution have created enormous demand for new ideas, less constrained by the past. Second, the increasing reports of success by many of you continue to offset the presumptions of skeptics. But it does not benefit any of us, nor does it benefit society, if we achieve success but lose our values. Let's encourage one another to put the needs of society and the needs of others first as we contemplate how to achieve ubiquity. We have the ability, you have the ability to give the world a healing gift. Many also will have the opportunity to benefit from that. I'm a businessman, and I believe business is usually the most effective means for achieving social or environmental reform, as well as for implementing technologies. Business is usually the most effective means for achieving social or environmental reform. I believe that. But we must always think first about the needs of others, about the needs of society and the needs of our planet. I do not want success if it comes at someone else's detriment. My goal is to give your science a way to get out broadly and equitably to the world and to see you receive the honor and rewards from your efforts. Indeed, provocative as it may sound, we've reached a tipping point. The potential of your work is so great, and the signs of promise are now so significant. This is our simple manifesto, to pass on a world that is better than the one we received. Abundant, non-polluting energy, widely available, would make the greatest contribution to this goal. That's a manifesto pledge for us to keep. It's a promise to you, to those who went before you, and to our children, and to their children's children. Thank you.
We have one question for Mr. Darden. Given the subject, what is your time frame or timeline?
What is our timeline? I have found throughout our work that patience is a virtue. Patience is important. And many people in business, and especially in the venture capital world, I hate to think that we might be in the venture capital world, but I guess that's sort of what we do. Many people in the venture capital world want to move very quickly. Of course, we would like to move very quickly as well. But they tend to stop. They tend to stop before success is achieved. And I think they tend to stop too quickly. In many instances, we've stayed with technologies for 15 or 20 years and continued when we were seeing promising results. So I hate to say this as a business person, although for the most part we use our own money, and so we're not worried about investor returns as would be some of the venture funds, but we don't really have a distinct time frame. Sooner is better than later, but we are willing to stay for a long time, and I don't want to move so quickly that we miss something. So I guess I would have to say we don't really have a time frame, and we don't intend to give up.